Hello all, Rick here, I swear. This video is covering every changeling that managed to infiltrate among you, us, solids in Star Trek, who they impersonated, what led to their discovery, and access they had while undercover. The first changeling that we encounter as an imposter is in 2371, when the Dominion demonstrates its experience at subterfuge when it cripples both the Tal Shiar and destroys the Obsidian Order. The Tal Shiar had already been infiltrated at an unknown time, when Colonel Lovok was replaced. A high-ranking officer in the Tal Shiar, Lovok had access to multitudes of classified files and plans, as well as the collected intelligence which could be leveraged for blackmail or coercion. Fortunately, it's unlikely that he had much time to peruse much of this, but like many others on this list, he did escape to continue his work, although the cover identity of Lovok was now exposed. When Enabrin Tain came to the Tal Shiar with a proposal for a joint strike against the Dominion homeworld in an attempt to curtail war, he was unaware that his main liaison in the Romulan Empire had been replaced. Because of this, every plan, every scheme they concocted was relayed to the Dominion, who were then able to remain one step ahead and set a counter-trap for their would-be assailants. When the joint fleet decloaked in the Amarian Nebula, the Founders' homeworld had been abandoned and the Jemadar fleet waited for them. Most ships were destroyed, and enough survivors were captured for the Dominion to gain intel from, including Enabrin Tain himself. This completely destroyed the Cardassians' central intelligence firm, leaving the Central Command with uncontested power within the Union, as well as nerfed the Tal Shiar severely, forcing the Romulans to recuse themselves from the war for a time. The Federation was compromised that same year, when Ambassador Theodore Krajewski was on his way to enjoy his extended vacation on Risa. He never made it to the planet and instead was captured by the Dominion, and a Founder assumed his identity. Being an ambassador gave him clearance and permission to enter and oversee numerous negotiations, influencing many others in that sphere, with the aims to destabilize the Federation for the Dominion. He used his authority to attempt to start a conflict between the Federation and the Zenkethi, with whom Starfleet has had noticeably tense relations. While aboard the Defiance, he usurped control of the battleship and almost completed his mission, also impersonating a string of other characters to evade detection. Eventually, Odo managed to uncover and stop him, but at the cost of killing Krajewski, who gave Odo his final words, "You're too late, we're everywhere." Meanwhile, on Kronos, Martok had returned to the Kether lowlands to hunt Saber Boar when he was ambushed on the Klingon homeworld by a covert Dominion team. They captured the high-ranking and respected general before replacing him with a Founder. Martok at this stage had proven himself a loyal and stalwart ally of Chancellor Gowron, who took his advice seriously. As a man who had worked himself up from a non-commissioned officer to such a prestigious position, he too had the respect of his soldiers, and as the head of House Martok, he carried much weight. I am curious to know what Sorella, his wife, thought of all of this, if she noticed his differences over the 2 years. During this time, Martok's replacement managed to increase tensions between the Klingon Empire and Cardassian Union to coincide with the loss of the Obsidian Order, and was successful in this endeavour, even bringing the Klingons to clash with Starfleet over the issue. Perhaps his most cunning trick was to deflect suspicion onto Gowron himself until, guess who outed him? Odo, once again. The Martok Changeling is probably the one who had done the most damage from his position of authority, and a full display of the level of disruption even one Changeling can have. Back on Earth in 2372, 4 Changelings made it to Starfleet Command and completely sidestepped all their security measures. The goal of these 4 agents was not to replace certain individuals like they had done with Martok or Lovok, but instigate events and basically stirred the paranoia within Starfleet, enabling the radical elements within the command like Admiral Layton. Layton's security measures were extreme, but he felt justified in them thanks to the repeated incursions by this unknown small cabal of Founders. He ended up on the verge of staging a military takeover of the United Federation of Planets, and was only halted at the last minute by Benjamin Sisko. We encounter at least one of these, possibly 2, in the forms of one who took the form of Admiral Layton briefly to enter Starfleet headquarters, using his clearance to gain access to numerous countermeasures and plans set in place. As Leighton was in charge of drafting security measures to protect against the Dominion, he was a natural target for the shapeshifters. Fortunately, Odo once more exposed this changeling before he could gain much more information, but as he escaped unscathed, it's probable that he tried again. We encounter a second instance when one impersonating Chief Miles O'Brien informed Sisko that there were only 4 on Earth as of 2372 in an effort to demoralize him. This shapeshifter too escaped without being caught, and the security measures on Earth during the war proved ineffectual at preventing their machinations. While on Earth, they likely managed to obtain all sorts of information, considering how easily they managed to evade security even when it was at its height, and as far as we are aware, none of them were caught. Of course, the changeling that hits closest to home is the one who replaced Dr. Julian Bashir. This reveal came in late 2373, when the real Bashir was hauled in, revealing that he had been replaced when he attended a conference on Meson 4. The timing of this is a little vague, but it was likely around the episode Rapture that he was replaced, meaning that it was the real Bashir who went to Risa and broke up with Lita, the real Doc who went back in time to Station K7, and probably the real Doc who treated Odo and Quark after their ascent on the L-class planet. It's also likely Bashir who tends to Sisko's health when he's uncovering the ruins of Bahala, despite the changeover of uniform. It's sometime around now that Bashir must depart for his conference, and we must assume that he changes into the older uniform for the same reason Sisko did when visiting Earth. DS9 was merely one of the first locations to be issued the new ones, and the other locales still used both. Rather fittingly then, it may be the Changeling Bashir that helps nurse the infant Changeling to health. It was during For the Uniform that Alexander Siddig was informed that he had been replaced by a founder, and the subsequent episode sees the reveal. During this, the false Bashir manages to prevent the collapse of the Bajoran wormhole by sabotaging DS9 and allowing the Dominion to pass through it. Subsequently, the Changeling creates a bomb to cause the Bajoran sun to supernova and almost succeeds in deploying it before he is found out. Of course, that is not the end of Starfleet's compromising from the Changelings, as revealed in Star Trek Picard. During the war, Section 31 had managed to acquire 10 founders, which they subjugated to intense experimentation to create sleeper agents for the Federation through the modification of their abilities to create more efficient doppelgangers. Originally only 10, these founders escaped, half crazed from torture, and returned to the Link at the war's end. However, they desired vengeance on the Federation for their pains, and broke away from the Great Link, recruiting a portion of like-minded allies to embark on a long-term infiltration of Starfleet. When contacted about this, Odo relayed the information to Worf, but by this stage the Changelings had had years to plan their long-term infiltrations. Despite the level of compromising we see, and years Vadik and her cohorts were at large, the plans for invasion must have taken place after 2399, as a key component was the body of Picard. In the following 2 years, an unknown number of these undercover founders made headway into Starfleet, replacing not influential people but those unassuming few near to them in advance of Frontier Day. While eventually they did influence the Admiralty, it is likely that they did not hold these higher positions for long, as the longer they were in place, the more likely they were uncovered, but lower-ranking personnel would have been replaced sooner. As it is, the Starfleet intelligence noticed the infiltration, they just took too long to respond. The Rogue's mission was to implant an alteration into Starfleet transporter coding that introduced a biological link to the Borg Collective into the system. A subtle act that did not need the replacement of Admiralty until the final hours of their plan. However, they did manage to secure the use of the USS Intrepid NCC 79520 by replacing a large swath of the crew, predominantly the command and security teams, with Changelings to chase down the USS Titan A. The extent of this usurping of Starfleet is still unknown, but we witnessed Eli Foster of the Titan, a criminal contact called Titus Rika, Captain Tuvok, and even off-screen Captain Riker being replaced. I would say that of these, Tuvok was the most compromised position. However, his role seemed to be merely to delay and misdirect Starfleet in the hours leading up to Frontier Day. The False Riker was sent to grab Troy so they had leverage against him, and the rest were all in locations to further the prior break-ins to Daystrom Station and set up the transporter modifications. Fortunately, their altered biology rendered them actually more susceptible to harm despite being more efficient infiltrators, and eventually a method to detect them was implemented into transporters, allowing for their gradual rooting out, but like the Dominion before them, they'd kept many of their targets alive in order to extract relevant information. With that, we've covered all the Changeling infiltrators that made their way into the Alpha Quadrant powers. The modus operandi seems consistent, even across the rogue factions in the 25th century. They find a target that they wish to acquire, then observe until they can strike and abduct that individual. Preferably they capture them alive, so that they continue to extract information from them, both for intel and to reinforce their replacement's performance. They seldom act in an overt fashion, unless cornered or about to escape, with their tasks usually being disruption and observation. With extended lifespans, likely in the thousands of years, the Founders have the patience and expertise to weave long and complicated ploys, evading even the most expert detection methods of Starfleet, the Tal Shiar and Cardassian Union. However, it does seem like they prefer to replace their targets for as little time as possible. General Martok's Imposter seems to be the outlier here, with about 2 years undercover. They will, however, adopt numerous personas to remain close to a target, fashioning a completely new individual if they're not going to be scrutinised too much, then replace their target as the culmination of their objective approaches. In Martok's case, however, we see a long-term embedded agent, showing that the Founders are capable of dedicated long-term influence too. Thanks for watching this breakdown on all of the Changeling infiltrators that we know of in Star Trek. Of course, there are many more that we never see, and are left to assume that they made their escape at the end of the war. Aside from the Splinter faction, the rest of the Great Link has abided by the Treaty of Bajor, and the Dominion has remained in the Gamma Quadrant. So, with that all done, I've been... Rick. Yeah, Rick. Until the next video, thanks again, and goodbye.